Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capital Download. We're in Carmel Valley, California, at the home of Leon Panetta. Thanks so much for being with us.
Nice to be with you, Susan.
You have a remarkable resume, an official in the Nixon administration, a California congressman, chairman of the House Budget Committee, director of the Office of Management and Budget, White House Chief of Staff for President Clinton, CIA Director and Defense Secretary for President Obama, and now author of a new memoir. It's titled Worthy Fights. Congratulations on your book.
Thank you very much.
The United States is now in a new fight against this terror group called Islamic State or ISIS. Your final two jobs in government were heading the Pentagon and the CIA. So with that background, could you assess for us the threat of ISIS? How big a threat should Americans view it as being?
I think it's a significant threat. I mean, the reality is that 9/11 we went to war against Al-Qaeda, who attacked this country. ISIS, may not be Al-Qaeda, but they represent the fanaticism, the terrorism. They represent the kind of evil nature of that kind of Islamic extremism that is just as dangerous as Al-Qaeda. And for that reason, I think the president was right to take us to war against ISIS, to pledge that we will disrupt and hopefully defeat them as well. Because if we don't, at least in my view, if they establish a base of operations in that part of the world, it's only a matter of time before they will then use it as a basis on which to attack this country.
So for the foreseeable future, for years to come, we should be braced for this fight.
Yeah, I think we're looking at kind of a 30-year war kind of history here, in which it's going to take a long time to be able to go after these elements.
Now, President Obama has ruled out boots on the ground. Whether or not that turns out to be necessary, do you think it's unwise to rule out options at this point in a conflict like this?
I think, I always feel that presidents as commander-in-chief ought to keep all of your options on the table. I think that's always a smart way to deal with it, because the enemy then never knows exactly what you may or may not do. I think I understand where the president's coming from, and that he's not looking for another invasion of another country where you've got 100,000, 150,000 of our troops at war as we did in Iraq. But we may very well need special forces to be able to work not only with the people on the ground, but to also help in providing that targeting that is absolutely important to the effectiveness of an air campaign.
We know that you and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and then CIA Director all recommended that the president 2 years ago do more to arm the Syrian rebels. If that had happened, would we likely be seeing a different situation here now?
Well, you never know whether or not something would or would not work. I do think that we would be in a better position to kind of know whether or not there is a moderate element in the rebel forces that are confronting Assad. I think if we had started 2 years ago, we'd be in a better place to be able to understand what's happening in Syria today.
In your book, Worthy Fights, you write that the president's decision to draw a red line on Syria, but then to kind of back off and say he's going to seek congressional authorization before acting once Syria crossed the red line, costs the United States credibility. To what degree are we haunted by some of these decisions that were made in the past? For instance, does that make it harder to get international partners now?
I think, look, I really believe in the president's power as commander-in-chief to protect this country. And I think it's really important when the president as commander-in-chief says that there's a line out there, said that they should not cross that and use chemical weapons. At that point, the credibility of the United States is on the line. And so when they actually go ahead and use chemical weapons, then I think it's important for the president as commander-in-chief to say a red line has been crossed and we are going to take action as a result of that.
But has it made it harder for the president to convince other nations to come with us now?
Well, I think everybody is, there's a little question mark as to, is the United States going to stick this out? Is the United States going to be there when we need them? And I think the president understands that that it is important for us to conduct a sustained effort here. If we're gonna defeat ISIS, it has to be a sustained effort. It can't be we're gonna go in one day and pull back the next day. That's not only going to take military leadership, it's not only going to take the leadership of the commander-in-chief, it's going to take the leadership of the American people to be there and support that kind of effort in order for us to ultimately defeat ISIS.
You know, you have to be careful not to learn the wrong lesson or to learn a lesson too well when a mistake is made. And I think President Obama definitely learned a lesson from George W. Bush's experience in Iraq.
Yeah.
Is that forged too great a reluctance to engage militarily?
Having served a number of presidents, one of the keys is that you learn lessons. So yes, you don't try to repeat those mistakes, but you also don't get so nervous about doing anything that you fail to make the kind of tough decisions that sometimes have to be made by a president if we're going to protect the country.
Do you think that's happened here?
I think he's gotten, he's obviously cautious about not trying to repeat those mistakes. Look, the country has been exhausted by, over 10 years of war. There's a lot of frustration, a lot of concern about getting involved in another land war. That's all understandable. I understand that. But recent events have made very clear that if the United States doesn't provide leadership on these issues, nobody else will.
Your picture of President Obama is so interesting in your book, and there are many ways in which you express admiration. You praise him for many of the things he's done,
Right.
for his leadership on the economy, for the tough situation he took over, and so on. But you also raise questions, I think, about his leadership. Too often, in my view, you write, the president relies on the logic of a law professor rather than the passion of a leader. Why does that matter so much?
My sense is that the president, who is bright and I think committed to trying to do the right thing for this country, that sometimes he gets to the point where he gets so discouraged by the process, the political process and the opposition. And, let's not kid anybody. It's a bad situation on the Hill. You've got people that would just as soon, bring down government. But there are those that want to try to govern the country. And so what he's got to do is come back and keep that fight going, because there's a sense now that everybody's given up on the major issues facing this country, given up on trying to develop any kind of budget deal to bring down the deficit, given up on immigration reform, given up on infrastructure funding, given up on energy, given up on trade, and you can't do that. This country has survived all of these years because people keep going back at it and fighting for what's right for the country. And that's what the president has to keep doing. He's got to roll up his sleeves, as discouraging as it is. And governing is a tough job. I mean, I've been there. I know how tough it is. You deal with people you don't like oftentimes, because that's the nature of our democracy in electing a cross-section of people from the country.
The picture you paint of President Obama's leadership is consistent with, but tougher than, the accounts we've read in Hillary Clinton's recent memoir and Bob Gates' recent memoir. Did you have any qualms about writing an assessment that is going to get a lot of attention and that is pretty critical?
Well, look, I've been a guy who's always been honest. I've been honest in politics, honest with the people that I deal with. I've been a straight talker. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But, I wasn't going to write a book that kind of didn't express what I thought was the case. But I think this is a moment where people have to understand that we can't have another 2.5 years of gridlock, that's going to hurt this country. And so president, leadership in the Congress, whether it's Republican or Democrat, this is a moment in time where they have to step up to the plate and make the tough decisions that have to be made in order to govern this country.
Given the situation in Washington, a lot of people you could fairly be disappointed with. You could be disappointed with the Republican leadership. You could be disappointed with the Democratic leadership in Congress.
Yeah, a lot of blame to go around.
There's a lot of blame to go around. Are you also disappointed with the president?
Well, I think what I want the president to do. I mean, I really think this president does want to do the right thing for the country. I really do. I think and frankly, I think he could still have a great legacy as a president. but he's going to have to jump in the ring and fight it out for the next 2 years. He could have a good legacy on the economy. He could have a good legacy in terms of trying to deal with the deficit. He could have a good legacy on energy and on health care and on national security. But he's going to have to get in the ring. And he's going to have to fight it out. And they have to develop some kind of better trust with each other in order to find those solutions. Now, that involves everybody. It's everybody that's part of that process. And so my hope is that the president, recognizing that we are at that kind of critical point in his administration, will take the bit in his teeth and will say, we have got to solve these problems. We've got to work together. And it's going to take some giving. It's going to take some risks. But ultimately, I think we owe it to the country to do that. Presidents, I think, can push in that direction. And I think the leadership probably would respond if the president said, damn it, we're going to try to do the right thing.
Now you know Hillary Clinton well. You worked with her when you were budget director and she was putting together a health care plan. You worked with her when you were in the Obama cabinet, and so was she. Would she be a good president?
Yeah, I think she would be a great president.
You think she would be a great president?
Yeah, I think she'd be a great president.
Would she be a president like her husband?
One thing about the Clintons is that they want to get it done. It isn't just about talking the game. It's about getting something done. And I think that's important. When it comes to being president of the United States, it's one thing to talk a good game. It's another thing to deliver and to make things happen. And that's what you want in a president.
You've served 3 presidents, President Nixon, President Clinton, and President Obama. If you were going to describe how you think history will judge them, in a phrase, a sentence, briefly, how do you think history will view first, with the benefit of passage of time, how will history judge Richard Nixon?
Well, I think history is already beginning to judge Richard Nixon based on obviously what happened with Watergate. I think the problem is that once a president resigns because of scandal, I think that'll always darken his view in history. Bill Clinton, I think because Bill Clinton always kept fighting back, because Bill Clinton kept coming back, and whether it was Democrats or Republicans, he found a way to be able to do some things. I think history, despite what happened with regards to the attempted effort at impeaching him, I think history will be kind to him. Barack Obama, I think we are at a point where I think the jury is still out, because I think these next 2.5 years will tell us a lot about his legacy. Look, the first 4 years and the time I spent there, I thought he was a strong leader on security issues. He supported our operations at the CIA. He even strengthened them. I think he was tough on terrorism. He made the very tough decision on bin Laden. But these last 2 years, I think he kind of lost his way. It's been a mixed message, a little ambivalence in trying to approach these issues and kind of clarify what the role of this country is all about. He may have found himself again with regards to this ISIS crisis. I hope that's the case. And if he's willing to roll up his sleeves and take on ISIS, and roll up his sleeves and engage with Congress in taking on some of these other issues, as I said, I think he can establish a very strong legacy as president. I think these next 2.5 years will tell us an awful lot about what history has to say about the Obama administration.
Secretary Panetta, thanks for joining us on Capitol Download.
Thanks, Susan. It's been fun.